You live with intention, what you allow into your body and what you don't. Like you, Azure was well built on a higher standard. Truthful, transparent labels, every ingredient listed. No proprietary blends. Organic isn't our finish line. We go further with rigorous third-party testing beyond industry standards to verify purity and potency. Living deliberately means choosing products that align with your values. Azure Well, wellness without compromise. Visit azurelivingwell.com. These products have not been evaluated by the FDA and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Welcome to Post Games, a weekly audio magazine about how and why we love video games. I am your host, Chris Plant. I got two quick things before we even get started. Number one, this week I'm running a review drive, which is a very fancy way of saying I'm asking every listener to take a moment and leave a review of Post Games on their podcast app of choice. Reviews are one of the very few ways of introducing the show to new people through podcast platforms, which means you can trade 1 minute of your time to keep this show alive for decades to come. Now, I don't have a business degree, but that's a great return on investment. And the second thing, in 2 weeks, I will be opening the listener mailbag for what I believe is the first time in 2026. Have a question? Record a voice message on your phone and send the audio to postgamesmailbag@gmail.com, or if you're uncomfortable with public speaking, text questions work just fine too. Okay, let's get on with the show. I am going to say a word, and I will ask you not to roll your eyes. Ready? Disco-like. Let's use it in a sentence. The 2026 fantasy game Esoteric Ebb is the best disco-like game since Disco Elysium. I know. I feel it too. Something's a bit off. As you, a gamer with just oh-so-refined taste, knows, the creators of Disco Elysium released their unique twist on role-playing games in 2019. The game's emphasis on conversation over combat, along with some really timely progressive politics, inspired a variety of copycats and homages, but nothing, including projects from the original game's developers, has yet to recreate the original's magic. Which is probably why the term feels sorta off. Can disco-likes exist if nothing is quite disco-like? Obviously, I'm here to tell you, yes. Esoteric Ebb is a game that proves just that, and its creator accomplished the feat not by accident, but with a scientific method-esque rigor. But I'm also here to serve as a sort of verbal antacid for the nausea that comes when I say that word. Disco-like. Ugh. Every new video game genre comes with skepticism, because often skepticism is warranted. Plastic instruments proved to be a landfill-filling fad. Hero shooters, extraction shooters, and battle royale convinced gullible executives to redirect a generation of talented video game designers onto projects that would take years to make and weeks to shut down. I have lived through booms and busts for MMOs, FPS, UGC, and MOBAs. But the thing about new genres is that eventually they become old genres. Consider the Souls-like, a genre that, for a time, belonged exclusively to its creator, then seemingly infected every corner of video games, and now is mostly just another type of game to choose from. That's why I think of a new genre like an active volcano. One moment, the status quo, then, boom! The new spews onto the surface. First, spectacular, then destabilizing. The ground shakes, its quake lifts the oldest trees out from their roots, its plume blocks out the sun and everything else, its lava oozes across the earth, incinerating all it touches. The volcano can't be controlled, and those who try get burned. But over the years, the lava cools into rock, new trees grow, the air clears, and the volcano becomes just another cool mountain, just another part of the landscape. New genres led by a standard bearer or two redirect rivers of players from one trend to the next, And following that player base comes a mix of inspired game developers and, frankly, cynical publishers chasing the new and the profitable alike. And more often than not, their money is lit on fire. Because it takes time for genres to cool, for their structure to be understood, for them to become something not to be imitated, but to be built upon. Today's guest on Post Games, Christoffer Bodegård, is the first game developer I've ever spoken with who has a graduate and master's degree in player agency, who has had the gumption to spend years reverse engineering a single game, and years more after that constructing something new upon that foundation, playing his part in converting a game into a genre. These days, people say roguelike without having played Rogue or even knowing Rogue exists, but it takes decades for genres to become so familiar, so diverse, so rock solid that they blend into the background. At first, they're just awkward, disco-like. It's kind of growing on me. This week on Post Games, I talk with the person who cracked the disco-like subgenre, Christoffer Bodegård, about his brilliant new fantasy game, Esoteric Ebb. Act 1, Dissecting Disco Elysium organ by organ. Act 2, Converting tabletop RPGs into video game Nirvana. Patreon bonus, all you have to do is write 1,000,000 words. Act 3, the news of the week with Aftermath's Nathan Grayson. Plus, to round out the episode, a banger new song from Dosa Divas. It's a huge episode, so let's get into it. As a video game journalist who has been doxxed, I am constantly preaching the message of maintaining personal digital hygiene. Every person, not just journalists, should be aware of how much their personal information, phone numbers, addresses, health information, and so much more is available on the internet, and that those private details are being sold without your consent by data brokers and can be used for scams, for harassment, and plenty of other illegal activities. The problem is so big and so widespread that you could lose entire days trying to find who has your info, requesting that they remove it, and keeping these bad parties accountable. That is why I recommend Incogni. The moment you subscribe and you authorize removal, Incogni begins searching data brokers, online directories, people databases, and commercial databases. You get to watch it all happen in real time on your dashboard. When I signed up, over 200 removal requests were sent instantly. Within 30 minutes, 60 requests have been completed. That's not just a number. I could literally see the list of data brokers that had been contacted and begun the data removal process. Because trust is good, but when it comes to safety, I want to see some results. And I do. After leaving a big publisher, I needed to find the right personal data removal service. Incogni is exactly what I was looking for and has already brought me tremendous peace of mind. To get an exclusive 60% off an annual Incogni plan, go to incogni.com/postgames. That's all one word. Or click the link in the episode description box or the link in the show notes in the newsletter at post.games. Again, 60% off an annual Incogni plan at incogni.com/postgames. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Quince. A thoughtfully built wardrobe comes down to pieces that mix well and last. That is where Quince shines. Premium fabrics, considered design, and everyday essentials that feel effortless to wear and dependable, even as the seasons change. And the seasons, my friends, they just keep changing. Quince has the everyday essentials that I love with quality that lasts. Lightweight cashmere sweaters, short-sleeve Mongolian cashmere polos, linen bottoms and shorts, tees in 100% Pima cotton, and European jersey linen. These are the versatile pieces that make a wardrobe actually work season to season. Quince works directly with top factories and cuts out the middlemen. You're not paying for brand markup or fancy retail stores, just quality clothing rated between 4.5 and 5 stars by thousands of people wearing it every day, and they only partner with factories that meet rigorous standards for craftsmanship and ethical production. I am living in a bit of a monochrome phase, really enjoying the black and whites right now. I have this killer black sweater that I am loving from Quince. It's so cozy, and I fancy white tee is basically the only way to put it, that I feel confident when I'm wearing. Look, I'm a 40-year-old man. Anything that makes me feel confident when I go out, that is a huge improvement. So stop overcomplicating your wardrobe. You don't need a closet full of options. You need a few pieces that actually work. Right now, go to quince.com/postgames, all one word, for free shipping and 365-day returns. That's a full year to build your wardrobe and love it, and you will. Now available in Canada too. Don't keep settling for clothes that don't last. Go to quince.com/postgames, all one word, for free shipping and 365-day returns. quince.com/postgames. Act 1. Dissecting Disco Elysium, organ by organ. Today's guest is Christoffer Bodegård, the writer and developer of Esoteric Ebb. The fantasy role-playing game is the culmination of 8 years of development, 4 prototypes, a bachelor's and master's degree in player agency, 1.25 million words, and a mind-bending epiphany while playing the first 30 minutes of Disco Elysium. Esoteric Ebb is also one of the most exciting games I've played this year, and I say that as someone who, please do not get mad here, never got around to finishing Disco Elysium and finds fantasy books exhausting, like very exhausting. Frankly, I have to have this conversation just to understand why this, of all games, refuses to leave my head. Before we start though, I just want to tell you a tiny thing, and it's about Bodegård's simple but inspired approach to storytelling, because it will come up in our chat. He believes that a player experiences agency not when they take an action, but when a game responds to that action. Or, to put it in far less academic terms, you could do a triple backflip in a video game, but it doesn't feel as if you actually performed the triple backflip in the fictional world until a nearby character says, "Whoa, sick triple backflip." Bodegård calls this interactive writing, and I know it seems really simple, but as we discuss, it's anything but. And there's a reason why you actually don't see this very often in most video games. So, let's dive in. Let's kick it off with some history. You were not able to collect a group of D&D playing kids when you yourself were a kid. So you didn't really start playing tabletop role-playing games until university. But from what I can tell, your entrance to the hobby was quite intense, to say the least. Can you tell folks about those early months with the game?
Yeah, it's really stupid because I met a bunch of really cool people in high school. Specifically, my high school time was stereotypically not awful. It was absolutely amazing. I'm still friends with the people was friends with back then. But we never got into D&D. I play with my old high school buddies every Friday now, usually except for today, I guess. But those guys, we did not play anything during high school at all. We did a bunch of other stuff, but we didn't get into D&D until, like you said, in university. It was like one evening in February of 2018. Well, I was talking about how I started playing as a player, and one of them just said, "Why don't we play D&D?" And I said, "Okay, we'll start playing in 2 hours." It was like 4 o'clock. We'll start playing at 6. Never done it before. I've never DM'd before. Let's just do it. Roll20 is a thing. Let's just make some accounts, roll it, make characters. Do it like that. So they managed to make their characters really quickly, and I just rolled with it. Let's just go. Have fun. And that campaign, they made some joke characters. They made a beaver, a robot, a grumpy dwarf with a name generated from Dwarf Fortress, and a sorcerer named after a soda. His entire backstory is soda-based. They made those characters in like I said, 1 hour, and we ended up playing with them for like 2.5 years, as you do, as is tradition. Really stupid characters just become iconic. They are all level 20 now, but we started playing like every single Friday, just doing the thing, going through all the motions, and I basically caught up on all of that lost TTRPG time by just doing that.
What did it offer you that you weren't getting from other games? Because, again, you start on a whim and suddenly you're playing it every week, so clearly something is resonating.
Yeah, why TTRPGs versus actual digital? I think, honestly, it's just such a more social experience. It's such a more wild, open experience. You always have, it's the whole thing of play versus structure, and the whole... those books we had to read in university when we learned about how to be scientific about video games. You can do anything with it, especially when you have players that are really good game designers. Well, as I do with all my players, I usually just ask them, how do you feel about this rule? Should we play it like this or should we play like that? If somebody asks me, can I do this? I will always ask, do you think that's balanced? What do you feel about it? Does that work in the system? Is it fun for everyone? And usually if it's fun, and it doesn't break anything, fuck it, do whatever you want. I have some players who want to do more prep work themselves, and I always tell them, okay, well, you're a wizard, right? Make spells. Just make any spell you want. You can customize spells in any way you want. Run it by me real quick, so just double check so nothing's completely busted. Usually they're good enough designers that it's just a fun thing. And we'll run with it, because it's as long as you put in that work, I feel like the best part about collaborative storytelling in that sense is that you can do literally anything.
It's so interesting that you use those words, because I just had a guest on named C.T. Nguyen who wrote this book, The Score, and he's an academic and philosopher in America. And his whole point is that rules, when they're in the real world, are so restrictive and claustrophobic because you can't just change them. You can't go to the government and say, I don't want to do this rule anymore. But games offer you that flexibility, and the best games especially do that, and it's something that video games struggle with compared to tabletop. I do want to point at something you just said, though. You just mentioned studying game design in university. I've met many people who have been bitten by like the tabletop or the D&D bug. Some of them start playing every month, some every week, some go and buy a bunch of stuff. You got an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in player agency. How? What inspired you? What bit you?
Yeah, it's a stupid thing, because originally I really hated programming. Like I thought I wanted to make games, but then I started doing programming in high school because I went to a technical thing in high school. So I got to do some programming, and I sucked at it. I just cheated all the time and just got the answers from my friends and never did any work because it sucked. So I started writing instead, because that was easy. Writing is easy to me. I can't stop writing. So I did that. I wrote a bunch of fantasy novels that sucked, and like learned the craft and so on. And at some point I discovered that in Skövde they had a program called Game Writing. The only one in the world, from what I understand. And it is what it sounds like. It's quite literally just a combination of sort of game design and writing. Like they have a bunch of creative writing stuff. They have some experimental game courses, along with stuff like film studies and all the classic generic creative writing stuff. Really, really fun stuff to do as somebody like myself. Also the sort of thing where you don't really get a job unless you're really lucky, but it was kind of perfect for me. I was told when I entered the program to do something else, because I'm not going to get a job if I just do the stuff that I get assigned. Plus, as someone who has such an easy time writing, it was super easy. I could complete the entire program course on 25% work hours or whatever, and then just spend the rest of my time playing video games. Or, as I did also, learn how to program and actually sit in Unity and just make games for myself, which is what eventually turned into what Esoteric Ebb is.
You mentioned the not getting a job after college, the warning, which was prescient, because after college, you could not find a games writing job, at least one that allowed for what you call non-linear storytelling. And we're going to go very deep into that term. So you decided to create your own experience and adapt as much of what you loved about tabletop as possible into a video game. And right off the bat, I'm sure there are people listening who are like, great, games have been doing that forever, like Baldur's Gate does that. But you see a difference between games where mechanics tell the story and games where the writer has control. And there is a difference I think, in the work that you like to do versus something like Baldur's Gate. Can you explain what that difference is?
Yeah, so it's more or less just a sort of definition of the practical work that you put in to make the stuff that happens in the game. And the problematic thing with just looking at it from the perspective of writing and design, in my eyes, was that we didn't really have a term for that very specific type of work that goes in when you're writing something that is entirely interactive and dynamic based and has a bunch of callbacks and different branching. Like, we just kind of call it writing. And specifically, I always look at it from the perspective of the gamer, the audience, because that's where it's born from the start. Like, that's where the language that creates the art lives and dies. And whenever somebody talked about Disco Elysium or Planescape Torment, even back in the 90s, the thing that people say that makes those games good is the fact that they have great writing. And they do. They have great writing. But I found that they like, when I analyzed it and I looked into answering the question, why did Planescape Torment do so awesome? And why did Disco Elysium do so awesome? And why was it like 20 years between them? That's an interesting question to ask. And why those two specific games, why do they stick out so much? Because I spent all of high school not playing TTRPGs. I played digital role-playing games. I got hooked on Dragon Age Origins, and I went like, okay, I want to play everything throughout history, because that's just how I do it. And what I found was, after doing the whole bachelor's and master's on player agency and learning how that works, specifically focusing on like UI design in that, I asked myself, okay, well, why does Disco Elysium work? Why does Planescape Torment work? And what I came up with was that everyone was wrong and I am right, because that's how I work, insane as I am.
That's why I'm talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to listen to me now. I've released a video game. But my theory is that the writing actually doesn't matter as much as everybody thinks. It matters. It absolutely matters. But my thesis has kind of been proven right now, because Esoteric Ebb, in my opinion, is a game that the writing is good. Like, I like what I created. I'm proud of it. But it's not nearly as like prose, poetic, and super amazing as something like Disco Elysium or even Planescape Torment, I would argue. I feel like I still have a bit ways to go until I'm like on that level. But what I focused on in Esoteric Ebb, the only thing that I really worked on to learn was what I call interactive writing, specifically the art of combining the writing with the design, the interactivity, the callbacks, the paths, everything that in that talk that you mentioned, that I've ranted about so much. It's essentially just the practical art of writing stuff, specifically like a book, except you're continually being extremely dynamic. You're merging game mechanics in an authorial intent way that creates something kind of magical. And it's very difficult to do this, but since we don't have the language to sort of describe what this practical art is, either we just call it writing, or we call it narrative design, or we call it interactive storytelling is the classic term. But interactive storytelling is so broad; it covers many different types of amazing and really cool things you can do in video games. But it doesn't cover the why specifically the practical art of making something like Disco Elysium is so cool, and the thing that I like so much about it. So that's why I keep using that word, even though interactive writing means something entirely different. If you Google it, it just comes up as something else. So you probably need a different term for it. But I needed some word to just describe this thing that I was doing in order to do the thing that I liked in Planescape Torment and Disco Elysium. And that became the term. Yeah. So it's still developing, right? It's still developing.
There's another framing, I guess, that you came up with that I found really helpful, which is, I guess I would call it true agency. You're talking about your definition of agency, which is that agency isn't the action, it's the reaction. That it's not the freedom to ask infinite questions, it's to get a response that is surprising and rewarding and rich. And what was really interesting about that idea is when I pulled it back, that's every game. The question is, what reaction are you getting? So you mentioned Dragon Age Origins, right? And the reaction is XP. Maybe a thing is dying. Baldur's Gate is better, and a comparison that you've actually made in another talk was you can build infinite boxes and climb up and escape out of a special boss fight. And that's the game's reacting in the physical space, but no character goes, good job building all those boxes. That's what you want, because you as a writer, as a storyteller, want that moment. You want the reaction to actually be in the text.
And I love emergent storytelling. I'm such a huge... Deus Ex is one of my favorite games of all time. It's fucking amazing. I love it so much. But generally speaking, if you build those boxes to skip the boss, and then the game doesn't really comment on it, it just assumes that you're on level 3 now, that's not authorial intent, that's emergent storytelling. And that is an entirely different thing of what you're doing if you're trying to master the art of making a game like Planescape Torment, where everything is quite literally authorial intent driven. There is no interaction that happens that the writer, the author, the designer did not already think of.
I realize this is probably one of those questions with a very obvious answer, but I want to ask it anyway. Why has this type of agency, this sort of reaction, been more common in tabletop than in video games?
Probably because it's so much harder to do. Like, already in Esoteric Ebb, I had to spend years just making sure that everything aligns properly. And even when we released the game, people go like, well, I found this thing that doesn't work. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's true. I'm going to add that in a sneaky patch. But there's so many different things you could add. It's infinite. And it's very difficult to do. And specifically the reason why it's not very popular to do it, or like why there aren't that many studios that attempt to do it, my guess, is that it's so incredibly difficult to do. And do it actually right. And it takes so much intensity of writing and design, and you need to have it in the design from the beginning. You need to understand it. That it's just like, we don't really have the institutional knowledge to be able to do it properly. And that's one of the things I really want to kind of change if I'm able to do it. Because now I've spent years learning this thing, and I'm not a master on it. Far from mastering this incredible art form. But I feel like it could be a lot easier to teach the next generation of game writers.
It really hit me after watching interviews and playing the game that humans are just inherently good with language, and it is the tool we use all the time, all of us, even if you don't make an effort, and that a computer inherently struggles with it compared to that, even with all the AI stuff going on. If anything, I think that emphasizes the struggle. Where it also hit me, wow, computers are just so much better at numbers. And video games are built traditionally on numbers. The more you can build it on XP go up or health stats or anything that is numerical, so much simpler. Where if you look at a board game,
gotta keep it in your head.
Even with D&D, start to you lose it. And I never really considered how tabletop and video games had divided along those lines. Oh, yeah, again, sure. Really until reading your work.
During my studies in university, when I had to write a scientific thing about what agency is, I chose that specifically because I needed a way to, with numbers, or at least qualitative data, calculate what a good design is in a dialogue system. And in order to do that, you need something to actually hard check, a yes or no question, something that you could, numbers. You need numbers. And my definition is not mine. It's cited from a work that I don't remember right now. But that work was basically where I got the definition of it's not input, it's feedback on your input that is the agency. And then specifically that when you have feedback on your choices and you get agency, you can get 3 different states. You can either not realize that it's something you reacted to, input, which means that you get no agency. Or you get the wrong feedback. You press a button that says hug him, and then hug him means you're gonna break his ribs. That's wrong. You didn't mean that. You didn't understand it. And thus, it's negative agency. It's not what you expected. But if you click on the button and you get what you expected, that's positive agency. Now, the big problem with that is that if you're essentially telling me then that in order to get positive agency, and positive agency is how we calculate something good in the world, does that mean that the player always have to be aware of what the outcome is on their choices? They have to always know. That means that you can't surprise them, technically.
And how much communication do you need to give them?
Exactly. And that's why the design in Elysium is so genius, the entire talking skill system. The fact that they constantly whisper to you, and this isn't something that I came up with, this is just listen to the interviews with the writers on Elysium and they will tell you this. The talking skills constantly chime in to whisper information that gives you context on your choices. They build up the world in a way that just gives you a way to understand everything.
We're going to talk about chimes a lot more in a bit, but before we do that, with the tabletop, you mentioned earlier like what really brought you into it and what was so special about it was that social factor, right?
Oh, yeah.
And here you are now, and you spent many, many years, almost a decade, making a video game that is tabletop without the social factor. What is lost in the adaptation of tabletop to video games?
It's absolutely the fact that you're working with real people. Like, if I'm sitting at a table versus sitting online, which I usually do it, play D&D online, for example, playing TTRPGs around a table is a lot more fun, I would say. You get that eye contact, you get like the emotional experience in a way more visceral way. But when you take that additional degree of separation and start imagining a player who might do a million different things, all of a sudden it becomes an experience of trying to understand time travel and trying to understand statistics in the fact that, okay, 2% of players are going to hate sleeping in the game. They are going to want to ruin the campaign and go around until 6 a.m. and then die. What do you do in order to make that player's experience also fun? Because you want it to be fun. I'm trying to be the nicest DM in the world, who's just trying to have you enjoy the game no matter what you choose to do. That's the tagline, right? Ruin the campaign. And in order to do that, you need to essentially understand how many people are going to do a certain thing, how many people are going to want to do a certain thing, and how do you accommodate the egos and happiness of as many people as possible.
I just want to say, because people will not be able to see this, when you said that at first, you did the international sign of an Italian restaurant owner who really wants people to sit down and have some wine, which I think is appropriate. Yes.
For sure. And like, so it's essentially, that's the difference, right? You have to imagine that you're playing with hundreds of thousands of people and trying to understand individually with a very personal experience of sitting one-on-one with somebody on D&D and trying to make them have fun. And also, more specifically than that, in one deeper level, challenge them to some point. Give them something that is actually not boring. And that's one of the things that I usually tell, like, game writers that I talk to that are, like, students or whatever. The number one thing you can do is just don't be boring.
There's a phrase that you've actually used, which is skimming is death. What do you mean by that one?
Yeah, that's just when you make a game that is specifically text-based, like, it is skimming is death, because the second the player gets bored, they're going to lose the plot. They're going to not understand what you're saying. They're not going to care. And then you've lost them and they're going to uninstall the game and stop playing. That's a question of statistics. Some players are just not going to want to play a game that has that much text in it to begin with, so that's fine. That's absolutely no problem. It's just a question of marketing to make sure that you don't get as many refunds as you might otherwise. But when you have them and you don't want to lose them, you have to make sure that there's something interesting within a certain level, within a certain closeness, proximity to your current situation. So whenever you have a really long dialogue thing that might seem boring, you have to give them the option to leave, for example. You have to make sure that whenever something that might be boring pops up, it's optional. Make sure that the player can say, no, I don't want to listen to this. For example, the tavern keeper in the game, she can blab on a bunch. And I wrote that dialogue and I was like, wow, she talks a lot. And the voices don't really chime in that much because she just goes on and on. And the best way to handle that is not to delete or cut down her dialogue. It's quite literally just to make it clear that you don't have to keep talking to her. And then also just have the voices at the end say, wow, she talks a lot. Huh. And then you can tell her, you talk a lot. And the player's just going to accept that then. They're going to be, okay, this isn't a boring dialogue, even though it technically is, but they can express themselves in the fact that it is kind of boring. If they think it's boring, maybe they don't. And that's the thing about the statistics. If you have 100,000 players and 10,000 going to think it's boring, just give them give them something to hook into. And that's fun.
Well, you described what's lost, which is this ability to respond in real time and not have to think about the statistics, right? If the 1% of players is going to ask a strange question, happens to be at the table, in real life you can respond to it. In the game, you have to hope that you had it in mind.
Yes.
What is gained by doing it in video game format versus the tabletop?
Oh god, it's the fact that I'm so much better at it. Because I can prepare. When I play with my players, like, I've gotten people to say stuff like, oh, Esoteric Ebb is such an amazing game, so your games in real life must be amazing. Well, I'm not bad at DMing. I'm okay at it. But when you're actually getting to prepare everything, it's the same thing with interviews versus Q&As. I would say that I'm not bad at interviews. Like, you can see I'm going like this. It's fun. It's great. I'm energetic. But doing me via text, I'm much better in text. I'm so much better in text, because in text I can be precise and I can be more thoughtful, and I'm not just entirely like going on instinct or improvisational. And that's the main difference, right? When you're doing it digitally, you get a prepared, very specialized and polished version of Chris as the DM.
In terms of what's good for the player, we talked at the very beginning about you being unable to experience D&D as a kid and a teenager because your group just wasn't playing it. You've now created a solo experience. Is there part of the current you designing this game for your younger self?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And like I said, my first experiences with all of this is through digital role-playing games. So I'm really like, whenever I play TTRPGs, I also look at it from that lens to some degree. I played a lot of role-playing games, not just the single-player ones, but also multiplayer MMO stuff and World of Warcraft for many years. But I feel like it's always a question of what did I want as a kid is one thing, but also what do I want now? What am I looking for in a deep single-player experience? And then after that, it's just a question of taste. That's the weird part about going like, do we make games like I make games because it worked out so well? Yeah, well, I'm just following my taste. And it happened to be this case that Esoteric Ebb, the zeitgeist accepted it, and my taste in whatever I liked in Esoteric Ebb kind of worked right now. Not for everybody, but enough so that it got a certain amount of a response that's good enough, very much good enough for me. And some of it's calculated, but a lot of it's just luck in the fact that I happen to have a taste aligned with the zeitgeist.
Would younger you have liked the game?
Yes, I believe so, for sure. In the same way that when I played Elysium for the first time, in the first 30 minutes, I realized that, oh shit, they not only managed to solve all of these, because I had a bunch of problems with how I would make CRPGs, and I didn't understand how CRPGs worked, and I was like, there's a bunch of problems in trying to simulate a D&D experience, and I had no idea how to do it. And within 30 minutes of playing Elysium, they had solved every single one of those problems, like expertly, smoothly, in a beautiful design, such a clean and beautiful design that everything just clicks, because I had to stop, just write down stuff and go like, yeah, okay. The world has now changed, at least for me. Cool. Let's keep going. And then I played the rest of the fucking game.
Let's take a quick break, and then when we come back, we'll talk about that epiphany, 8 years of experimentation design, and at least a year that can pass before you have 30 minutes of otherworldly experiences. This episode is brought to you in part by Factor. You got the cold days going right now. You've got big things to accomplish this year. You have no time to cook. Well, don't worry. Factor makes eating healthy easy with fully prepared meals designed by dietitians and crafted by chefs. So you can eat that tasty food, you can feel good, and you don't have to plan or cook or any of that stuff. I personally recommend right now the Parmesan and sun-dried tomato chicken penne. It is delightful. You got the green beans, you got the pearl onions. It's so good because they have quality functional ingredients, including lean proteins, colorful veggies, whole food ingredients, and healthy fats. You got none of the refined sugars or artificial sweeteners or refined seed oils, the stuff that you don't want. You just feel good eating Factor. And you have so many options, 100 rotating weekly meals. If you prefer high protein or you want something more calorie smart, maybe like Mediterranean diet or GLP-1 support would help, or you just want some ready-to-eat salads, they've got it all. Always fresh, never frozen, ready in about 2 minutes. So again, no prep, no stress, a delight. I have been eating Factor meals for a long time now. And, just not having to be stressed, that can be a lot. The fact that these are delicious meals, that's the cherry on top, my friends. That's the good stuff. So head to factormeals.com/postgames50off and use code postgames50off to get 50% off and free breakfast for a year. Eat like a pro this month with Factor. New subscribers only, varies by plan, 1 free breakfast item per box for 1 year while subscription is active. Act 2, converting tabletop RPGs into video game Nirvana. Okay, so we're back. We're going to go really deep into Esoteric Ebb right here. The game is the fruit of nearly 8 years of experimentation and design. You spent 4 of those years trying to create this tabletop-style video game. Each year, you're making another prototype. They get it just how challenging this task is. 1, making a video game. 2, making a tabletop video game. You described your first as like tabletop simulators spliced with Baldur's Gate, and that it worked, but the combat didn't work, and without the combat, what even is the game?
Yeah.
And then, as you just said, a few months after you put that first prototype effectively in a box, assuming it'll collect dust forever, Disco Elysium comes out. What about it specifically convinces you to return to this project?
It was the fact that I had so many problems in my original Ebb RPG project, which was essentially just me trying to see if I, as a solo developer, could simulate playing D&D with me as a DM. Fun little project, cool experiment, didn't work out. Bad idea. But the fact that I couldn't do combat properly is mainly rooted in the fact that I'm not very good at design, which I mentioned before, I think. It's not my thing. I'm not an expert of design. I'm more of the writing, on the writing narrative side. But I wanted to learn. And I realized that, oh, look, they have managed to do something here that's very special. Specifically in the fact that they managed to sell a CRPG with all the tropes and all the cool, not all the tropes, but like all the structures and formalities of non-linear CRPG design. And they managed to do it perfectly, beautifully, and they did it without traditional combat. Wow, you can do that? That's amazing. Holy shit. So what do? I look at that and go, okay, I'm still a solo developer, and they are larger, very much larger studio, but I can still do that. I can do that by myself. It's fine. So I just kept working on this stupid prototype that was complete shit. And those 4 years I spent learning how to do interactive writing, like trying to analyze Disco Elysium and seeing where it goes.
4 years is a lot of time, and you seem to be aware that what you're making, in your own words, I'm not saying this, is, to quote, complete shit. How can you tell when something stops being complete shit and starts looking like whatever it is you're trying to sculpt?
That's the big question, right? It's the same question you have to ask yourself when you're in any sort of creative field, but also when you're doing the whole startup entrepreneur process and you're making video games and you're making indie video games on Steam and you're doing all that stuff. I'm very rooted in that community here in Skövde, so it's just a question that comes up very often. How do you do that correctly? How do you make a game that sells? And I know people like Christoffer, who's a big how to market a game person in the indie space. He usually says something like a game needs to have the magic. And that's a very good way of putting it, because at the end of the day, this is art. As much as we can look at stuff like, well, you can make a friend slop game with 4 players and then you can sell it like that, and it's probably going to work out fine if you hit those notes and you sell it at a perfect timing where there's not too many friend slop games out and people are looking for something, and it manages to get viral and you're playing as some gnomes in the house and you have fun and you walk around with a gun. Super fun ideas. They work so amazingly. But it's all taste. Like, you can make 10 of those, and the question of which one rises to the top is always just going to be whichever works best for people, whichever has the magic. And that's I know anybody who tells you that they know what's going to sell or not, they don't know. But everybody has a gut feeling, and some people have a gut feeling or taste that just happens to align more with the zeitgeist, the overall audience, than others. And I'm just lucky that my taste happened to work in this case. Like, Esoteric Ebb is entirely just what I would like out of this type of game, nothing else.
I adore the game, and it only ultimately works because the writing in the game itself is fantastic. But I know what you mean by the magic, because there are a million games that I could have played. And I tried this one, and the magic is what gets you in the door. For a second, I thought it was the idea of, yes, you play as the world's worst cleric, but there's a different phrase that you've used. In an interview with the Radio Times, you said, what Esoteric Ebb does is essentially the exact opposite of Disco Elysium. And I think that'll surprise people, because you also call it a disco-like. It's a great pitch. I don't know what the hell it means, but it immediately sticks on my brain. What does it mean?
In that interview specifically, I think I meant that Disco Elysium has a gritty art style. It's very beautiful, but it's kind of gritty. It's more realistic. It's more, hey, do you want to play as a depressed Estonian cop and go on a mystery adventure like that? That immediately, from the visual perspective, it doesn't strike you as very wacky and fun. It sounds more introspective and more like, a deep indie game about depression or whatever. It's not what Disco Elysium is. But that's sort of like the first impression for a lot of people, I think. And then you play it, and you get hooked by the fact that it's incredibly hilarious. It's very deep, and it's poetry in interactive form. But it's so funny. The reason I believe that so many people actually stick with a game like that, instead of it just being super niche for a couple of nerdy people who like that sort of stuff, is the fact that it's so incredibly funny, and that's the thing that keeps them from skimming and keeps them actually engaged. But the selling point, like from an initial perspective, is more, this is deep, introspective stuff. Whilst Esoteric Ebb, if you look at it, it's almost like Adventure Time. It's colorful, it's fun, it's a cartoon, it's comic. That's the first impression. You're playing as a cleric and you're stuck on the windmill, and the windmill goes around, and it's, oh, look how silly this is. That's the initial impression. That's the hook. Become the world's worst cleric. Ruin my campaign. But if you just do that, then you have a fun little D&D adventure, yes. But I knew the thing that actually worked, and the thing that actually hooks people long term is when you make a story that means something. And I don't want to work for 4 years on a story where I'm not saying anything that I don't think is interesting. I can only force myself to write so much goddamn text if I am constantly obsessed with the thing I'm writing, to make it interesting, to make it funny, to make it hooky, to make it to have themes that actually, for me at least, mean something in the world, in the real world. And that's why it's political and so on and so forth.
Well, on that note, what is it that you felt you needed to say?
Well, I searched for several years in just trying to find that, because I had no idea. I knew that I had a bunch of feelings about a lot of different topics, and if you know me in real life, you'll know that I'm immediately the type of person that just, if we can talk about radical politics and we can just discuss it for hours because it's so much fun, and I'm very in your face about that in real life. Not online, because I think it's counteractive to do it online because it's such a bad environment to discuss that sort of stuff, but I'm the type of person who loves those topics. And that's what keeps me going. That's what hooks me as a person. So talking about stuff like, what's it like being a man in the modern world, because I'm a man in the modern world, and talking about what is politics in the modern world, and trying to do that in a way that isn't just stupid fantasy allegory, because doing one-on-one allegory on stuff is, I get why that works, and I'm doing it a lot in Esoteric Ebb. But it's not really that interesting to just go one-on-one. It's more interesting to go broad themes and then just use those to explore really specific questions, and then trying to dodge laser beams to not make it stupid or too shallow.
There is a lot in the game about workers' rights and the complexity of it that I think is really rich and textured. The dwarves who are very pro-workers' rights are not perfect, nor are their ideas utterly flawless. It's very lived in, and at the same time, yes, it's not like you can look at that and say, oh, this is about this union.
Everybody needs to be real. The way to solve the Monty Python problem, which is basically, hey, you can have very funny jokes and you can do silly stuff, but if the characters are just characters and basically they're just made for the skit, that can be funny. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's not interesting on a deeper level. So what I'm trying to do essentially is make it funny on the surface, but always with a few rules. And the rules are essentially absolutely no fourth wall breaking humor. which I fail at some point. Like, no references. There's references in the game. I try not to do it. The number 2 is to keep every single character 100% as realistic as I can. Make sure that the dwarf, Alphos, he is not just a caricature of what a labor union leader would be in that sense. He's not just a dwarf. He has deeper levels. He has a bunch of different stuff when it comes to his background. Stuff that isn't even explored in the game because it's not relevant in the moment. But every single character has that behind them. And they are deep and they have a lot of things that are interesting. And most specifically, none of them are simple. Like, none of them are just the bad guy. Even though we have alignment, which I'm sure we'll get to later. Like, there are objectively evil people in this world, and they are interesting. And there are objectively good people who are even more interesting.
I briefly want to go back to Disco Elysium because the first time you show this game publicly is on the Disco Elysium subreddit.
Yes.
Do you enjoy pain?
That's a good one. Yes, for sure. I absolutely love it. Like, it's this very interesting. It's the same reason why it's so much fun to dodge laser beams. And I feel like I got away with so much stuff in Esoteric Ebb, which is so much fun. I want to be a little bit afraid when I'm writing something. Otherwise, it's not interesting. And when you post something to a forum like that, and you go basically, hey, this is a thing, and then just see how people react, that's amazing. It's beautiful because the reaction to that original post where I had like a little basic prototype that was just a straight up copy of Disco Elysium, but with way worse graphics and ugly hand-drawn art by me, by the way, which none of the game currently is like hand-drawn by me because I'm terrible at it. But it was like a basic prototype. The way people react to that was, okay, so you're making a disco-like. You're very clear about that. You're trying to make a copy. That's cool, but make it more unique. And if I had reacted at that point to all those comments with, fuck you, you don't know shit, I'm the person who made this, I'm gonna be a genius like Robert Kurwitz, and yes, you wait and see. Or even worse, don't compare me to Disco Elysium. This is an entirely different thing. I worked for years on this. I am an expert in my field. If I had reacted like that, which I genuinely would never do, immediately the entire potential audience for my game would go, oh, so you're an absolute asshole, you're an idiot, and you don't, go away, please leave. Instead, I did the only smart thing, which I also genuinely comes from my heart, which is, thank you so much for even looking at this stupid little thing I made. I'm going to keep working on it because I'm so interested in trying to find what could make it unique. And then always ask, because I'm genuinely, I want the data, what do you think I should do to make it more unique? And I did that for years. Just asking people, what do you think? Oh, so it's not unique? Cool. How do I make it unique? I would love to hear. And I did that on a bunch of different forums.
I see that in the game, and I think it's very smart. Yes, you want to make a unique game, unquestionably. But the counter to that is you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There is a reason that you were inspired by Disco Elysium to begin with, and that's where I want to circle back to the chimes, because chimes seem like the revelation, I guess, of Disco Elysium. And I don't even know if that's the term that they use. It's a term that you certainly use. But it does bring something really crucial from tabletop RPGs into video games. Can you tell people about them and how they really define Esoteric Ebb?
Yes, so I still haven't had a one-on-one talk with any of the designers and writers on Disco Elysium, which I would love to do in the future. And I want to ask them that exact question, by the way. But my interpretation of the system, which I think they call it either talking skills or they call it the interjection system. I call it chimes because I think that's a good pitch. The way they sort of work is, from what I understand, is first of all, they obviously represent the mind of the protagonist, which in a single player experience where you want your player to understand your predetermined character's thoughts and so on, it's just such a good tool to put you in the mindset of the player.
Just for people who haven't played it, can you describe literally how they work? Just because I'm sure there's some who are a little lost.
Basically, you make a character at the start of the game and you have stats. And depending on what you set those stats, you get different voices in your head and they say different stuff. So in practice, what that is, you have dynamic content as your playing the game, you're reading through a linear part of the game, and then you get little pieces of comments, lines of dialogue that could either be seen or not seen, depending on what you've made during character creation and what your character is and what they progress into. So if you have a high strength score, you get to hear a bunch of stuff from strength. If you have low wisdom, you get to be a cleric where you are bumbling around and wisdom is essentially just completely clueless all of the time. And you get those specific comments from those stats as voices in your head with different personalities. Like in Esoteric Ebb, it's different aspects of this one character that is predetermined, called Ragn. And that's basically how you get a dynamic experience where everybody can make their own version of Ragn and then get different experience.
Yeah, what was interesting to me, and I haven't played it enough times, so that I would love for you to pull back the curtain a little bit, but my strength is weak, and as a result, is basically a sniveling fascist.
Yeah, I worked on the back and forth a bunch because it's such a... Early on, I tried doing stuff like, for example, make it so that if you have low strength, then you're going to be lashing out at everybody. So low strength is more sort of toxic masculinity, high strength is positive masculinity. And that didn't really work out because what you get essentially is most people who put low strength, they want an experience where they don't want masculinity to be an aspect of the character that much. And they can't go too hard on the whole thing of, oh, you're just going to lash out and be angry all the time. That's not what they picked. So instead what I did was I tried to focus it on being afraid, being weak, like genuinely just, okay, you see a person who's powerful, bow down before them because you are nothing. And that makes it more fun. That makes it more of a thing, oh yeah, I picked low strength. Of course he's going to say that. Same thing with low intelligence, just making sure that it's the exact opposite. It's the exact same personality as the higher version of it, but it's reversed in a sense that's just fun.
What then would I see if I was playing with like really high strength, if that was one of the two places I really invested?
If you have middling strength is the most interesting one. In my opinion, it's the one that I worked the hardest on, I think, and the one I succeeded the best on. Middling strength is going to be more traditional, you are a man, you gotta do this. Boom. Whilst super high strength, the higher you go, the more positive masculinity it becomes. The more it becomes about, okay, well, you are a man. How do you handle this? And that's in order to represent the entire philosophy with your god Urf, and the fact that Urf is all about personal sacrifice. It's about making, like, Urf is genuinely the good god, because that's a subversive thing about the game, right? It would be very easy to go, masculinity is toxic, and this god who performed horrible acts of murder across the world is the representation of the masculine, literally patriarchal system of religion in this city-state. The boring choice there would be to make that god an asshole. The interesting choice is to make that god the nicest, most wonderful human being in the world. And then just make it so that he is in a situation where, due to a bunch of different factors, he has ended up where he is. And then you get to explore his perspective, and you can discuss whether or not he's actually good or not. But that's the whole thing about alignment, right? It's about intent, not about outcome.
I invested in like a very high intellect, charismatic cleric who is also a rogue and also apolitical, and who might be the biggest asshole on the planet, but also is extremely good-hearted. And it's rare that you get a character like that. I don't even know, I've never met a character like this person that I am playing as, and it's really something else. Before we kind of wrap up this section, I want to talk about this game finding its footing, because it doesn't find its footing just from appearing on Disco Elysium subreddit. That is step one of what I can tell is a gajillion steps. In fact, at one point, you have a demo out. It seems a bit bleak. And I think there's a lot of skepticism around traditional media these days, that the only way to break big is to get recognition from like a big name streamer.
Oh yeah, streamers, yeah, for sure.
Maybe even have a partnership with them. But your experience is very different.
It's a strange experience.
Can you tell folks about how your game basically got discovered?
Yeah, so I started the Steam page in August of 2022, a couple of months after that initial post on the subreddit. And I did that, and I spent basically 1.5 years doing first a public playtest with the initial build, and then just trying to get as many wish lists as possible through any way I could, because that's how you get the potential deal with a publisher. And I needed money because I was running out of money. I had managed to collect 8,000 wish lists towards the winter of 2023. And that's good numbers. That's good numbers where you could release a smaller indie game and it could be a hit. Like that, those are impressive numbers, absolutely. So I don't want to downplay that. But for the type of game I wanted to do, I had found that I would probably need something like 20,000 minimum in order to actually score a deal with the publisher in the way that it looked like at that point. Because it's such a risky game, right? And the whole thing about the humor needing to work, the fact that narrative games in general could just fall flat if you fuck up the ending, a bunch of different problems. So I released the demo in December 3rd, 2023, and nothing happened. But, as you say, like it's not the type of game streamers like to play. Like I got them I call them sympathy streams from streamers who would love to play through the whole game. They would do it, but they just can't go ahead and voice it themselves for an entire stream. They can play like one session, and then they're going to go, please do voice acting. And I'll go, yes, I would like to do that. We'll see if we do it in the future, but it's very expensive.
The game has almost 1 million words.
Yes, it's a lot of money. It's like I always say that, which is true, that it would quite literally double the budget if we wanted to do professional voice acting for the whole thing. But either way, so I had no chance of getting streamers. That's just going to happen. But my coach at the incubator told me, basically, you have to do something. Go ahead and just spam journalists. Do that.
Yeah.
And I said, no, I don't want to do that. I don't like doing that. I'm not the kind of person who does that. I don't like talking to people. I want to make my game. But obviously he's right, so I just did it eventually. So I looked over like people who had written about Elysium, and I just looked over my list, and I made a priority list, and I took the first guy at the top, and I was like, okay, this guy seems cool. Let's send an email to him. Didn't get a response at first because people are busy. I released the demo. It did okay. Got like 1,000 wish lists, which is awesome. That was when I hit 8,000, I think. But that whole Christmas I just spent going over it and going like, oh, well, the game's not going to work. I'm running out of money. I have like 4 months left till I burnt all my savings. So I didn't freak out or anything because I was still proud of what I did. But I'm going to have to do something else. But then in January, I think it was like 12th, I wake up one morning and I got a bunch of messages of people like, I saw an article in my feed, my Google feed. I'm like, what? What's a Google feed? And there was one PC Gamer article out that was basically just like, hey, this game is out. It's like a disco-like, and it's really cool. It was like a glowing endorsement of this little demo that I put out. And over the course of the next 2 weeks, I went from a number basis, 8,000 to 30,000 wishlist, which meant all of a sudden, instead of being like, okay, I'm going to run out of money in 3 months, it was like, okay, which one of these 5 publishers that I have contracts for do I sign? And which one can get me money the fastest so I can actually just start working on the game straight away? And I picked Raw Fury because they were just everything is lined up perfectly. There were a bunch of other great publishers too. But yeah, that's how it ended up. And after that, it's just make the game.
I'm sure there are people listening to this being like, that is ridiculous and stupid. And I believe ridiculous and stupid are actually the exact words that you've used. You have called this a, quote, ridiculous, stupid path.
Yep. It's stupid. And it's primarily because like I was looking for a job up until the point where I signed with a publisher. I wanted another job because I didn't believe in this thing. And I didn't have the numbers. I had good numbers, sure, but I didn't have the numbers where it's like, okay, this is absolutely going to work. It's going to click. And without that, I don't feel like I would be confident enough to waste everything on it. But at the same time, I got the question, why did you keep working on it? Why spend all this time like as my friends are playing Final Fantasy 14? Why do I sit on Unity here and just keep working on it for year in, year out without ever getting anywhere? Because I spent like 4 years not getting anywhere. And the answer to that is just very basically, I had like a mantra, which was, what else would I be doing? I like doing this. This is the thing. I get satisfaction from doing this, especially the writing part. And what else would I be doing? I play a lot of video games too. I love that. I have a bunch of family and friends, like stuff going around. But generally speaking, when I just sit here, as long as I was able to burn money, which I was for a lucky amount of time, the thing I wanted to do was just sit here and make this goddamn game. And I kept doing that until it was done, more or less.
We'll put a bow on this section before we go into the bonus stuff. But real quick, the game's been out for, I guess, like a week or so.
Yeah, like 10 days, I think. 10 days.
Did it work? Are you good? Are you going to make more? Where are we?
It's doing good. It's not, I always say, it's not life-changing money. It's not, haha, fuck you money, I can buy a yacht. It is quite literally, I have a job money.
Good.
That's good. I can probably keep working on the next project. We're going to look at what to do with the game going forward. And like Raw Fury is very happy. We're going to talk more about specific numbers later on, I think. But it's good. I'm happy. It's really good.
It's the, I should never call it shot, but it's the beginning, my friend. I look forward to us. We'll have to check back in 6 months because every now and then a game comes along and you know where you can see the ball in the air and it's heading towards the fences and you're like, oh, that's interesting to watch.
It's something about the word of mouth too, because it's one thing about marketing is very difficult and it's like difficult to get the game out, especially when it's not voiced, because the expectation for most people is that Baldur's Gate 3 Disco Elysium fully voiced. Why would I play a game that I have to read? So it's going to lower the amount of people that get into it immediately. But if the word of mouth is good enough and all of your friends are playing it and you're spreading it and everybody talks about it positively, which so far it's, I am so incredibly grateful to everybody who's like sharing the game with their friends and so on. That seems to be going okay. The reviews are good. I'm so happy with the result of from an artistic perspective. I don't really care about the sales number from that perspective. As long as I'm able to keep working on my next project and get enough money for that, I'm done. I'm happy with this.
Let's use that as a place to wrap the main section. Before we do that, though, can you let everybody know where they can go check out your game?
Please find Esoteric Ebb on Steam currently. Only on Steam. I would love to do more storefronts and consoles and all that good stuff. So hopefully that's later. Will be fun.
A Patreon bonus? All you have to do is write 1,000,000 words. This is where we split up. Patreon subscribers, I've got a bonus section for you. Christoffer sticks around to talk about the nitty-gritty of adapting tabletop RPGs into video games, like how his script for Esoteric Ebb ballooned from 300,000 words to 700,000 words and far beyond. And, relevant, he explains the job of a video game story editor, one of the more fascinating and under-discussed jobs in modern gaming. And if you, after listening to this, are thinking, hey, I'd love to try out some tabletop RPGs, I want to get some D&D in my life, Christoffer also shares his tips for first-timers to get into that very hobby. Now, if you're not a subscriber, no worries at all, because I still have a lot more show for you. We will go straight from here to the news of the week, where I chat with a special guest from Aftermath about Woke 2, Electric Boogaloo. Act 3, the news of the week. There is plenty of bad news in the world. This week, though, I am sharing some good news. My pals at the independent worker-owned video game publication Aftermath just completed their first Woke Week, a set of stories about... Actually, I'll just let them explain it for themselves. Today's guest is Aftermath co-founder and reporter Nathan Grayson. Nathan talks about the positive ways individuals and communities are making gaming a more inclusive space. Nathan, we are here to talk about Woke Week, but before we do that, we gotta mention that Aftermath is having a subscriber drive. Why do indie publications do these? Why do subscriber drives matter?
Because subscriptions are our lifeblood. They are how we make the lion's share of our money. They also, I think that it's easy to look at this and conflate it with like subscriber fatigue and all of that, when in reality, if you're giving money to like the New York Times or the Washington Post or whatever, that's going to some big amorphous conglomerate. Whereas if you are giving it to us, that is going to 5 people who rely on every last subscription, every last penny to survive. So yeah, for us, it's a matter of creating a fun, interesting event that reminds people that we exist and that we're doing cool things.
To celebrate that you exist and also to bring some attention to this drive, you are doing a theme week, and it is Woke Week. I have heard that Woke Week originated from this very bold and exciting place, which is you just kept saying Woke Week, Woke Week, Woke Week over and over again. What is Woke Week?
So Woke Week is a week of stories dedicated to kind of exploring the idea of quote unquote woke 2, which I think also began as kind of a joke, but I think is a useful rubric for understanding just where culture is maybe or hopefully headed. I think that after kind of, Trump's election, or maybe even leading up to it, his re-election, I should say, there was this notion that like wokeness was on the out, or was, out, and like that we were headed in this very kind of dark right-wing direction. And obviously politically that's still true. But I think that culturally people have become in some ways even more aware of those around them and of the world around them. And I think that Gita's piece about what woke 2 could be defined as put it really well, where woke 1, the movement that kind of, occurred in the 2010s that, even got that name as like a pejorative term almost, despite the fact that the term woke originally comes from the Black community. It was meant to mean something pretty different. That movement was ultimately kind of co-opted by corporations, by maybe some individuals acting in bad faith. And a lot of it became, at least online, somewhat shallow and performative. It was about demonstrating awareness. It wasn't necessarily about doing that much with it. And so I think that Gita's point was really salient and good, which is, woke 2 is about acting, is about action, I should say, is about creating community, is about supporting those who need it and supporting those around you, doing things that make a tangible difference. I think that we want to celebrate that and reflect on it, and also talk about, the things that have come before and that have informed that.
Yeah, I think celebrate is a really important word here, because why I wanted to talk to y'all is woke 2, as y'all framed it, as your colleague Gita Jackson, as they wrote about it, is I find optimistic and hopeful and invigorating. And part of that is reflected in how you have written about it and how you've written about it in the games industry. There might be people listening right now who are like, oh, these are going to be stories about maybe terrible men who've done terrible things. But a lot of what you're covering is people doing the work of actually producing positive change, of setting an example of how that can look in the world. One of the great moments in one of your pieces is at the beginning of a piece that you wrote on Games Done Quick. Can you describe this moment that you start that piece with?
Yeah. So the piece opens on a moment that took place during Awesome Games Done Quick, which was in January. And so basically it's a big speedrunning marathon where they raise money for charity. And in this particular instance, what was happening is that 2 runners were playing Split Fiction, which is a game from Hazelight that's cooperative in nature. And they reached a point where basically one of the 2 main characters, who happened to be a person of color, got transformed into an animal. And so then the runner basically took a moment to point out that this is something that happens on multiple occasions in this particular game. And then it plays into kind of a trope that tends to other people of color that, suggests that they are something not human. And of course, the other main character in the game, who's white, is not subjected to similar treatment. And so what was interesting about that, A, is that it happened at a big video game event at all, because I think that in other spaces that just wouldn't be permitted, or they'd be like, we want to keep politics out of it, or blah, 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 various excuses. And B, that it was well received, that the audience heard this and they clapped and they were willing to listen. And I ended up interviewing this runner afterward, and they were like, oh yeah, people came up to me in hallways in the stream room and stuff like that, and also said that they really appreciated what I had to say, or that, it opened their eyes to an issue that they hadn't thought that much about before. So
yeah. What I found really lovely about that moment is both the person who is providing this context and this experience and the audience are meeting each other. That the fear that we saw, I think, a lot in the 2010s was, oh no, you don't like it, you're going to take away my toys forever. There will be no more toys. And here I have chosen to speedrun this game. These people like this thing. But at the same time...
I mean, I think it's important to clarify, speedrunners love the games they play. And they have to, because in many cases they're investing thousands of hours into them and not just playing them like we would. We're like, okay, time to do like a little replay where I kind of like pitter patter around, take my time, whatever. No, I mean, they are trying to break records. They're trying to go as fast as humanly possible. This usually involves optimized routes. This usually involves doing things the same way over and over until you get it perfect. For many normal people, I think down that path lies only madness. And yet they choose to do this. And so any sort of criticism that you have of a game like that, A, would be very well founded because you've played that game front to back more times than probably its own developers did. And B, it comes from a place not of, this is bad and it should be taken away from everyone or whatever, but of like actual constructive criticism of, I really love this thing and here's a place where I see that it could be improved.
Creating an environment where constructive criticism both happens and is received isn't like an accident. It doesn't just materialize. It is proactively built. That is something that you chart across really this entire piece on the speedrunning community and specifically Games Done Quick. Can you talk about some of the ways that they've been proactive about creating this space?
Yeah. So they are very cognizant of kind of, I think, the sort of diverse makeup of their audience at this point. It wasn't always that way, actually, and this is not in the version of the piece that you read yet, but it will be in the final version. I spoke to the founder of Games Done Quick, Mike Uyama, and he was saying that, especially when it all started, because Games Done Quick began not as a big organization or something with tremendous ambitions, but as 20 people in his mom's basement doing like a little marathon that they hoped would go over well, but even then, like it was fraught with internet connection issues, all these problems. And he was saying that even though back then he definitely wanted to create something that was more welcoming, because, this was like in the, I think, late 2000s. Even back then there was an awareness that game spaces were not always the best about that they could be exclusionary, that they could be misogynist, homophobic, etc. But he was also saying that like back then he didn't even know the correct terminology for like a transgender person. He didn't really know any of that. And it wasn't until the early 2010s that he became more aware and that he started to make it a priority. And the organization then grew over time in that regard. And so there's some chicken and egg happening there where it's okay, was this community always very diverse? And then GDQ had to react to that? Or did GDQ sort of opening its doors lead to more diversity? And I think that his kind of supposition was column A, column B. But what they've done, I think, especially in recent years, is just really prioritize making sure that remains the case. One way that they do that is through simply, like chat moderation and things of that nature. They also have now multiple affinity groups that are for different kind of people of different backgrounds, different like underrepresented minorities within games. They have one called Femme Fatales, which is for women and femmes and non-binary people. And then they have another one called Black in a Flash, which is for people of color. They also have smaller affinity groups for Asian Americans and for Latinos. And then they have a whole bunch of different like dedicated events in this series called Hotfix that airs every week on Twitch. And those have run the gamut. They had an event called GD Queer. They've had one, I think, for non-binary people. They've had one for disabled people. They really try to, I think, and not in a cynical way, tick every box. They try to, reach as far as possible, because I think that what they want to demonstrate, and this goes back to like foundational thinking too. Mike was saying this when I was talking to him, is that anyone can be a speedrunner, that you don't have to be special or preternaturally gifted. And in fact, many individual speedrunning communities around specific games start because one person was like, I want to run that. I want to see what happens. And then other people watch them do that and they say, oh, yeah, okay. Maybe I'll give that a shot too.
I think that I say this not like a cynical business way. It's hard for me to turn off manager mind after having done it for a long time. But as you said earlier, it's a very specific type of person that's attracted to this. And it's not going to fall into like a specific group. It's going to be that one person in the friend group across every group in the world. So you need to create an inclusive space, because who knows where you're going to be pulling from. What I enjoy about your coverage this week is it is through games, but that's everything, right? Everything is so split up now that you have to create inclusive spaces, because that's how the world works. It's just reality. And you see so many people fighting it. I do want to talk about one other piece because I think it's related to that. And that is your colleague Luke Plunkett, who reported on what a DEI manager at a AAA studio actually does. Now, this is a full piece. I recommend everybody listening goes and reads it. But was there anything that you were surprised to learn about that job?
I'm not sure that I would necessarily say that I was surprised by any of it. I think a core kind of element of this that people should take away, though, is on one hand, big companies implementing DEI programs, there can be a degree of cynicism attached to that on the company side of things. Executives thinking that it will somehow head off problems at the pass or, make them more money in the long run. These tend to be the motivating factors when a big company does it. But, this is an interview with somebody who actually did the work. And I think that pretty much across the board, the people who are actually doing the work in these cases really do care and are trying their best to, create environments that are more inclusive and more diverse because they think that will actually make them better.
Before we wrap, is there any other stories that you are really energized about that you want to make sure people read from Woke Week?
Let's see. We still have a bunch more on the way because, when these things tend to have, bigger stories can take some finessing before they fully land. I'm working on another big one about the Warframe community, which is, Warframe is a game that, based on its name, you're like, oh, it must be all like grim, dark, and weird. But no, it's actually like another really like inclusive and diverse community built around a game that is, I would say, like very inviting and pretty queer. And I think that piece is going to be fun because it's not just about the community makeup, but it's also about this interesting phenomenon that's occurred, I think, around that game, and probably similar ones as well. There's almost this parasocial dynamic between the developers and some of the people who play the game. And so like the seeds of this piece were first sown when I was at TennoCon last year, which is their annual convention in Canada. And we were getting an office tour, and they were talking about how they often receive like graduation letters from fans. So as part of their, like, I'm graduating, they send that to friends and family. And then also video game development studio, Digital Extremes. And I was like, oh, that's odd. Why? And so I started interrogating that question and then found out, these developers also have gotten invited to weddings, some of which they have attended. And that also, as with any long running game, there are players who have died. And that is something that obviously impacts the developers too. I'm going to open the story with an instance where somebody died while playing the game last year. And so the character was still standing there in the game. And so tons of other players gathered around them and sort of created a living memorial to this particular player who had been, big in the community for a long time. And so, yeah, I'm writing a piece about how all of these real life things overlap with this particular video game and what makes this game, both in terms of its structure and mechanics and whatnot, and also in terms of that community, different.
Where should people go to get all this stuff? How can they support y'all?
Yeah, they should go to aftermath.site, which is a very simple URL. We have like a specific section for Woke Week. If you just click the little banner above a story, it'll take you there, and you can see all of these different pieces that we have been working on. If you want to support us, best way to do that is just to subscribe. There's, again, a big old button on the website. Shouldn't be too hard to find. And right now, we are also having a sale in celebration of Woke Week. So basically, you can get your first month, if you subscribe on the monthly basis, for $1, which is close to free. So why not?
That's great.
And then you can also subscribe annually for a total of $75 to our higher tier. And that's basically paying the price of the lower tier to get the higher tier. So again, great deal.
Disco-like. 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 It's, one day at a time. Anywho, next week, I chat with the artist, archivist, and game designer Danielle Brathwaite-Shirley. In 2020, in the thick of the pandemic, she published BlackTransArchive.com, an experimental, freely available, and interactive collection of Black trans experiences. Brathwaite-Shirley is without hesitation, one of the most energizing people I have ever interviewed, not just in post games, but across my 20 years in journalism. After this call, I was like ready to run through a brick wall and then like 5 more brick walls. She wants games to get people from different communities talking to one another about the toughest and most intimidating topics without sacrificing the vulnerable in the process. And listeners, she convinced me it's possible. You need to hear it. It is something special. Until then, though, a reminder, post-game supporters get the show and the newsletter early on Fridays at 5 p.m. Eastern. They get extra acts and bonus materials. This week, Patreon listeners got an entire bonus section with our guest, Christoffer Bodegård, in which we talked about just how hard it is to make even the simplest interactions you have with a dungeon master in D&D into something someone can play alone in a video game. We also talked about how to get into D&D to begin with. It's a really cool conversation. Plus, each month, subscribers get a bonus episode in my ongoing series, Past Games, in which I share deep dive histories into the gaming anniversaries of 2026. When this episode that you're listening to right now goes live on the free feed, a new episode of Past Games will have just gone live on the Patreon feed. That exclusive bonus episode is about LA Noire with special guest Tim Rogers, the closest that we have in the world to an LA Noire expert. It's a big one, it's a good one, and no ads on anything. You can subscribe to the Patreon for just $5 at patreon.com/postgames. Subscribe to the newsletter for free and get show notes at post.games. Post Games logo by James Bareham, theme by Mark Sparling. All Post Games interviews are edited for concision and clarity, and a special thank you to both of this week's guests, Christoffer Bodegård and Nathan Grayson. Like the show, leave a review. It's Review Drive Week on Apple or Spotify, or just share the show with a friend. And now an original song from Dosa Divas, available on April 14th on Switch 1, 2, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, and PC. This is Battle Beneath the Crust by Marsky. I'll see you next week.